I often tell people I'm definitely in the top 10 of shearers in the Southeastern United States, and it's because there's maybe 7 of us. This is what I want to be doing, for sure. I cannot explain to you what it is about shearing, but I feel like I'm not alone in thinking that it's kind of an addictive occupation. Once you get the hang of it and you start doing it, it is a hard thing to walk away from. Plenty of shearers that I know are still shearing well into their 60s, 70s, even 80s. And it's one of those things that once you get the hang of it, you don't want to quit. The first time I saw somebody shear a sheep, it's like watching an orange get peeled. It's so satisfying. It's just very satisfying. There's definitely a little bit of a physical and technical challenge involved in learning how to shear. It's this long, hard process. And then once you can, you put all that hard work in, you certainly don't want to stop now that you finally got the hang of it. I was born in '74. I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia, which is in the southwestern part of the state. My parents were both professors at Virginia Tech. My mom, she was a math professor. My father taught engineering. I sort of got started in dance when I was in early elementary school, and that was mostly focused in the direction of ballet. I played the clarinet all through middle school, all through high school. I was never a great musician. I've always had an interest in animals, but so do most kids. A lot of people sort of grow out of that, but that was not anything that I really grew out of. I've always been interested in playing with and working with animals.
It's hard being the oldest dog, isn't it? You have to show everybody else what's going on, keep everybody in mind.
My parents were kind of anti-animal. They didn't want the mess and the fuss of having animals in the house. My growing up experience was definitely influenced by growing up in a college town. I was probably in my 30s before I realized that the world population wasn't mostly under the age of 25, just because in my world it was. I got my bachelor's in biology from Virginia Tech, and in Blacksburg there's also a veterinary medicine school. I did go to 1 year of vet school. I sort of looked around and said, I think I'm here because my parents want me to be here, not necessarily because this was the right choice for me. As I got a little older, that actually probably would have been a fine pick, but I needed to do some more growing up before going to vet school. So when I left vet school, I knew that I didn't want to be in academia anymore. My parents, as college professors, they had some expectations about what kind of occupation they thought my brother and I were going to go into, and education was always very much at the top of the priority list, which is great. However, it was coupled along with, all right, we expect you to be in one of these sorts of occupations and not something else. So I recognized that I had always been taking steps mostly to meet my parents' expectations, and I hadn't really taken any time or done any living keeping in mind what seemed like my strengths were. And so I went through a bit of a crisis during that time when I was looking around saying, yeah, I need to stop just making decisions based on what my family expects of me and start looking at what I really want to do, what I'm interested in doing, what kind of life I want to live. In their mind, college education was about making a good living, which is part of why they still scratch their heads about why in the world I'm shearing sheep and calling dances is my way to make money. My parents feel they feel concerned for my overall safety in the world because of my income. There's all kinds of ways to make a living, all kinds of different levels of income that you can be absolutely happy at. In the family unit that I grew up in, your goal was to make the highest income that you can, and to come to terms with the fact that I don't necessarily feel that way. That was what I had to make peace with, was that this value that I had been raised with, that I had to recognize that in my heart of hearts I didn't necessarily really believe that value. My parents may need to still come to peace with the fact that I'm doing these things. I'm 50 years old now, they still haven't quite accepted it, but so it is, so be it. I do like to spend a lot of time outside, and so I spent several years working or playing in the woods, so mostly doing trail crew work with the Appalachian Trail Conference. I've spent lots of time in gardens, I've spent lots of time working on farms. I spent several years working as a stonemason. I'm thinking about wanting to be working outside with my hands. I'm mostly based out of Brasstown, North Carolina, and when I moved to Brasstown was 2006. Got involved with things at the Campbell Folk School, and I've lived in Brasstown ever since. I do really like living in the mountains. In this part of the world, another great reward to shearing is sheep need to get sheared, and there's not very many people that can do it or can do it well. And so if you're one of those folks that can provide that service, not only for the shepherds who need to get their sheep sheared, but for the animals themselves, it's important for their health and comfort to get their wool off. There's still wild sheep in the world. Those guys will shed, but domesticated sheep have been bred to the point where they will not shed. They're not going to just lose their wool. It's going to have to be sheared off. Most breeds of sheep are okay with annual shearing. I used to be one of the part owners of a fiber arts supply and equipment store called Yarn Circle. We could sort of do all the pieces of the puzzle that we wanted except shearing. And in this part of the world, it's hard to find competent sheep shearers. I showed interest in wanting to learn how to do that, little knowing what a commitment that was. My introduction to shearing was a weekend sheep shearing course offered at Middle Tennessee State University. Learning how to shear takes some time. The Australians say you can't consider yourself a sheep shearer until you've sheared 10,000 sheep. Now, in Australia, that's one season, but here in this part of the United States, that's probably several years. The first season that I did a full season of shearing was 2016. I tell a lot of folks, if they're interested in learning how to shear, the way to do it is to apprentice with somebody. When I was learning how to do this, at the end of the day, I would feel like I'd been hit by a car. It really was absolutely the hardest physical work I've ever done. You spend a lot of time leaning over, and a lot of people are like, oh, you're back, you're back, you're back. For me, it's more about my hamstrings, back of my legs get really tired over the course of the day. But shearing sheep is physical work for sure. It gets easier as you go along. I tell people when they are considering starting to learn how to shear, I always recommend that sheep shearing school at MTSU. And what I say to those folks is, this isn't going to teach you how to shear sheep. It's going to teach you whether you want to continue to learn how to shear sheep. For most people that spend a weekend doing that intense workshop, at the end of it, they say, I never want to do that again. If I ever have to shear sheep again, it'll be too soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's absolutely my main income for sure, is sheep shearing. When it's all said and done, I'm probably on the road shearing about 7 months out of every 12. So I travel a lot. Part of that is just because in the Southeast, nobody has very big flocks in this part of the world anymore. It's a lot of what I call pet flocks, 10 sheep, 15 sheep. It's not as if there's tons of animals in a single state, so I can just stay there. I have to travel if I'm going to do this. So I travel about 7 southeastern states. Maybe I've camped the night prior in a barn, or maybe at a state park. Maybe I stayed with somebody that I'm shearing with. Often I'll spend the day going to several different places to shear, because usually there's not enough animals at any one spot. If you were shearing in Australia, you very well may be shearing at the same farm for several days, maybe even weeks, with 5 other shearers. Not the case in this part of the world. In the Southeast, Probably the largest flock that I've helped shear has been about 400. When I'm going to a flock that size, I always have other shearers with me. A 400 head flock in other parts of the world is nothing. For sure in Australia, the flocks are in the thousands and tens of thousands. Same thing in the UK. The flocks of sheep are much, much bigger, even on the western side of the United States. For me, 75 or 80 sheep in a day is as much as I'm ever doing. And again, part of that is because I'm traveling so much. A lot of the folks that are teaching me about shearing have been shearing for a long, long time. And when they first started shearing, every farmer had a flock of 30 or 40 sheep as part of a diversified farm system. That's really not the case anymore. Most people that are raising sheep, it is absolutely a hobby for them. It is not the way they're making their living.
Somebody I knew who had both goats and sheep took a load of each to the county fair, and she was doing shearing demonstrations there. And at the end of the first day, the organizers of the fair came to her and said, "We're really happy you're here. Everybody's really enjoying seeing what you do. We're hoping you can leave the goats at home because all their caterwauling is scaring the children."
It's hours and hours in the car. I just try to make my driving as efficient as possible. Shear somewhere, drive for half an hour, shear somewhere else, drive for 45 minutes, shear somewhere else. The biggest expense is keeping a vehicle on the road. There's not only the wear and tear on your car, the cost of gas, but just your time in the car. It's a lot of time. Generally, what we do is charge what we call a farm stop fee, which is hopefully covering the cost of travel and the cost of time to set up all our gear and get going, and then a per head fee. Now the per head fee is going to be based a lot on what kind of animal we're shearing. The other piece of that puzzle is the condition that the animals are in. If the sheep are not in the best condition, they're harder to shear. Sheep that have lice, they're harder to shear. Sheep that are felted, harder to shear. Everybody pays approximately the same farm stop fee despite how far you live from me. So the person who lives half an hour from me is paying the same farm stop fee as somebody who lives in South Florida. The hope is that by the end of the season, everybody's combined farm stop fee covers the cost of keeping the vehicle on the road, the wear and tear, the gasoline. Probably not the time spent in the car. For the most part, that's donated, but then the per head fee hopefully is covering the cost of purchasing and maintaining shearing equipment. There's so much time and effort spent not at the farm shearing. Sharpening gear, maintaining gear, keeping the maintenance on your vehicle up, all that kind of stuff. It's funny, in some places I go and I tell people what their fee is and they're astounded at how expensive it is. And then other places I go, they're astounded at how cheap it is. My shearing partner and I will also shear llamas and alpacas. Mostly we're shearing sheep or Angora goats. I would love to have sheep of my own. Because I spend so much time away from home, I don't even have a dog or cat of my own. I'm just gone all the time. But at some point, I would love to have a small flock of sheep. Certainly there's a lot of hot and sweaty and dirty involved in shearing. I get a lot of satisfaction from working with animals. Being a woman sheep shearer in some ways doesn't help me. In other ways, it puts me at an advantage. Because there are certainly some people that are like, oh, it's a woman sheep shearer. She's going to be gentler with my animals. She's going to take things easier. My animals are going to have a better experience. Then there's the flip side, which are some people are like, no, this is a man's job. I need a big, strong guy to do this. And the truth is, I'm not a big, strong man. I can still get your sheep shorn. It's not necessarily going to be any more or less gentle than if a man had done it. Just this past season, I went to shear for the first time for a new shepherd, and when I got out of the truck, she said, "Is it just you?" And I was like, "It's just me." And she promptly pulled her cell phone out and got on the phone to her husband and was like, "Yeah, we're gonna need your help, come out here." Of course, once they see what I can do, now they're like, "Oh, this is great. We'll hire you next year to come shear our sheep."
Let's get into it. Roland Smith is into the belly. The time is now 14. We just pipped at the post there, Doug.
1, 2 and 4, and then David Burke on number 4 there, followed by Aaron Haynes.
There are sheep shearing competitions. They used to be only men. All you saw were men, but that's changing. So there's more women than there used to be. We're still outnumbered, but that's beginning to even up some. When you see somebody who's in good practice and in good shape shearing, it doesn't look like it's all that difficult, and plenty of people go out and buy themselves a set of shears and say, I'm gonna do this myself. And you learn pretty quickly it is not as easy as it looks. Generally, you flip the sheep or goat over kind of on their rear. Every now and again, somebody will say, why don't you just get a table so you don't have to stand on your head to do this? And my response is, oh my gosh, you're gonna take my two most important tools away, my right leg and my left leg, because I do a lot of animal control with my legs and my feet. Generally, I'm shearing llamas standing. For alpacas, what I'm doing is I have a pulley system. So I'm putting a rope around each of the animal's 4 feet, and then I'm sort of stretching the animal out, if you're a football fan, in the touchdown position. So their back legs are stretched one way and their front legs are stretched the other. Shearing alpacas and llamas in my book is a 2-person job. That animal could kick me, kick the shears right out of my hand. I'm using a piece of equipment that literally could cut their ear off. And so having good control out of the animal is going to be safer for the animal as well as for me. So it's 7 minutes of the animal squealing and squalling and spitting and making a ruckus for a whole rest of the year of comfort and happiness. So it's kind of worth it.
Opinionated.
Certain breeds of sheep have a reputation for being more opinionated, is what I usually say, or spirited as compared to others. Individual animals are going to have a different amount of the wiggle factor. I feel like often a sheep that really fights you while you're shearing, when they're done and you let them up, they're gone to the back 40, as far away from you as they can get. You better be done, because when they're done, they're gone.
I know.
A goat, oftentimes you'll flip them over to shear them and they will squall and carry on and cry and cry. And as soon as you let them up, they don't even walk away. They're just like, oh, I'm over it. Well, give me a pat now, I'm fine. Some of the distress that they seem to be showing is mostly just about being irritated that you're holding them against their will, not that they're actually in any kind of true physical distress. It's great if the surface where you're shearing is flat. If the animal is big, sometimes the sheep I'm shearing weighs more than I do.
Hey, somebody next? Are you volunteering?
And if they wiggle around and we're on a hill, we're going downhill. Not a lot of farms have perfectly level surfaces, and so sometimes you're sort of struggling with that. One of the big disadvantages to the electric hand piece is that I have this cord that, as I'm moving the animal around while I'm shearing, I have to be sure that I don't get tangled up in the cord and the animal doesn't get tangled up in the cord. I call it playing jump rope. I'm constantly playing jump rope. I'm moving the cord out of my way, moving the cord out of my way. The other piece of equipment I use, the hand piece, is a motor driven. It's mechanically driven. So I'm still plucking something in, but it's a motor, the same kind of motor that you find in a washing machine or a big fan or something. The motor is driving a belt which runs a clutch, and then there's a drop that goes to the handpiece, the piece of equipment that I'm holding in my hand. One of the greatest things about this is the motor and the cord and everything is up out of my way. So the only thing that I have to worry about in that case is I can't let the animal We can't dance away from the equipment because the motor and everything is attached to the barn wall or the fence or whatever. So I have to keep the animal in position, in the proper position. I have not had any super bad injuries, but I've definitely heard stories of folks that have had bad injuries. If there's any part of the animal that I'm worried about not shearing, I will put my hand on it because I'm sure gonna feel it if I hit my hand before I hit something important on the sheep. So one of the biggest parts about that are the teats. You don't want to shear across the teat, you'll cut it. The first thing you shear on a sheep if you're doing a commercial style of shearing is probably going to be their brisket, which is their chest, and their belly. Sometimes there's things in the wool, you'll find little bits of whatever they've been eating, hay, feed. Occasionally you'll find insects that are in there. A bad thing from a shearer's perspective is to find any sort of wire, metal, or fencing, because of course, as you shear through, that could potentially break your equipment or just cause your equipment to jump and go somewhere that you don't want it to go. Some folks that I'm shearing for are raising sheep specifically because they want the wool. They want to wash it, pick it, card it, spin it. Maybe they'll dye it a different color and then crochet or weave or knit, whatever they want to do. So some folks are true craftspeople. Plenty of shearing that I do are for sheep that are being raised for other purposes. So maybe folks that are showing their sheep, they often do not want the wool. They're more concerned about the sheep's overall condition, how well they're going to do in the show ring. The wool is actually sort of an annoyance more than anything else. They'll do what's called fitting, which is actually shearing the wool in such a way as to accentuate the good qualities about the animal's body and to sort of de-accentuate the not so great qualities about the animal's body. So some people are raising sheep for meat. They just want the wool off to keep the animal healthy, and that wool might end up in the landfill. There's certainly plenty of wool that I'm shearing that I'm sure is ending up in the landfill. And the meat breeds don't tend to have super nice wool, and so it's fine that that's ending up in the landfill. So my mentor's name is Jonathan Hearn. During the time when Jonathan was first learning, if farmers would offer them the wool in exchange for the cost of shearing, they were all thumbs up about that because the value of the wool was greater than what they were charging for shearing at the time. That is absolutely not the case anymore. For sure, as more synthetic fabrics came into our world, the value of wool has gone down and down and down and down. I believe that that will swing back at some point because a lot of our synthetic fabrics are petroleum based, and of course we're trying to move further and further away from that. Wool is magical stuff, we kind of forget, but it stays warm when it's wet. You can use it for lots of different things. We'll remember how magic wool was at some point. It might not happen anytime soon, but at some point, human beings are going to remember what amazing qualities wool has. If the shearing is really good, if it's a nice open fleece, then I could probably shear a sheep like that in less than 5 minutes per sheep. But if the sheep is skinny or sticky, or they're of a breed that they have wool like all the way down to their eyelids, all the way down to their feet, every darn where there's wool, that sheep is going to take a lot longer to shear. Somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes per sheep, but it depends on a lot of things. Shearers are often sort of seen as makeshift vets.
They're looking plumper than when I last saw them. I'd still say if you're going in one direction or another, go for more food.
If your sheep are too skinny or too fat, I'm going to point that out. Often shepherds won't know if their sheep have lice.
Just woke all the lights up, so she's going to start scratching.
The lice you find on sheep are different from the lice you find on goats, are different from the lice you find on people. So I have more than once had an experience of telling a shepherd that I'm seeing lice on their sheep, and they're like, what? And they're scooching their children back away from the shearing station. It's like, no, you don't have to worry. You are not going to get lice from your sheep. Lice are very species specific. I don't usually have to worry. I will spend the rest of my life learning about shearing, for sure. Everybody has their little tricks that they do that make things a little easier, make things a little faster. If I save 10 seconds on this sheep at the end of the day, that means I sheared 3 more sheep. When you're leaning over shearing a sheep, you are constantly thinking about how you can make your movements efficient so that it takes less time. So the less time I take, the easier it's going to be on that individual animal, the easier it's going to be on me, the sooner I can stand up and give my body a break. So I've learned a lot about the value of time, even just a few seconds, because if you're doing it over and over and over and over again, a few seconds 100 times over the course of the day starts to add up. Taking the 10 minutes at the end of a shearing job to talk to somebody seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but the 10 minutes turns into 20 minutes, and I have 6 stops today. So if I take 20 minutes at 6 stops, I am now that much later at the end of my day. Somebody on a trail crew that I was working on had a John C. Campbell Folk School catalog, and they brought it out at dinner one night. We're sitting around and looking through this catalog going, oh my gosh, everybody was like, look at all the amazing things you can take at this place, we should go. So my first introduction to what the folk school was at all was just looking through their paper catalog. I came to the folk school to participate in their work study program. The folk school offers mostly week-long classes in different Appalachian crafts and skills. Most people are just paying for their week at the folk school for tuition for the class and then for food and housing while they're there. But the folk school also offers, for folks that have maybe more time than they have money, you can sign up for the work study program. When I was a work study, the exchange was you would do 2 weeks of work to take a 1-week class. And so you could come for 6, 9, or 12 weeks, depending on how many classes that you wanted to take. One of those classes was actually Bob Dulcimer's Dance Callers workshop, and I just never left. I just fell in love with the Brasstown community and the Western North Carolina environment. Where else in the world can you go where there's such a variety of different craftspeople all in the same place? And so living in Brasstown, I think it's almost inevitable that you're going to dabble in several things. So I like to do a lot of fiber arts, mostly knitting, but a little bit of spinning, a little bit of felting, a little bit of weaving. One of the things I do now is call Contra dances and square dances social dances.
Welcome to the dance, everybody. We're so glad you're here. And all together, we're going to take 4 little steps to the middle. Ready, go. And a 1, 2, 3, back it up, and a 1.
If you need a social outlet, but you don't necessarily feel super comfortable in like a party setting, the dance is perfect, because there's this activity happening where you have an opportunity of socializing with lots of people, but there's no pressure to have great social skills. As long as you know your left and from your right and you can walk around, then you're good to go. And so it was a great way to socialize without necessarily having to feel the pressure of being good at small talk or being funny or whatever goes along with the pressures of being at like a party, something like that. Introverts can have a great time at the Contra dance. People really set aside a lot of stuff when they come to the dance. People of all different ages, all different walks of life, all different life philosophies. You can all come to the dance and have a great time, enjoy each other's company, enjoying the same music and the same scene. Dancing is the only reason why I ever wore skirts. I never used to wear dresses or skirts for a long time. I was definitely a tomboy growing up. And it wasn't until I realized how much fun it was to wear a skirt when you were dancing. I'm like, oh, this is great. This whole thing goes twirling around. It's so good.
Just find yourself a partner. Come on out on the floor. We're making a line of dancers. Take hands with your partner. And there's another couple up or down the hall from you. Those are your neighbors. Say hey to them. Hi, neighbors. 2 ladies, do-si-do in the middle. Ladies walk forward, passing by the right, scooch to your right, and back up, passing by your left.
I did not find calling to be easy to jump into. So that first workshop I took with Bob at the folk school was a week-long workshop. And over the course of the daytime, you sort of worked at a slow pace, building your skills. But every evening, there was an open to the public dance, and the students in the class were the callers for that dance. There were probably 6 or 8 students in the class, and so each evening you were expected to call 1 or 2 dances.
So let me look at my cheat sheet here and just make sure I remember the order that things go in. Yeah, good. So here's what's going to happen next. All 4 ladies into the middle, and you come on back.
That was an insane amount of pressure. That was a good thing to do. It was a real crowd, and you just bumbled and stumbled your way through it. Because it was a calling workshop, everybody on the floor knew that's what was going on. So the crowd was very forgiving, which is great. The folk school is a great place to learn how to call. The crowd was really this perfect mix of experienced dancers and new dancers. You know, there were lots of stumbling, and you just work through that, and every time you learn a little more and it gets a little better. I feel like when you first start calling, everything's just about trying to keep your ducks in a row and get your timing right. And as you get more comfortable, you can let out a little more of your personality in your calling.
You guys are fine. I shower and everything. It's good.
And once that starts happening, that's when people are like, oh, I like this caller, they're kind of fun. That's when other community dances start reaching out and saying, hey, I saw you at the folk school, will you come call it our dance in Franklin or in Asheville or wherever? And my rule for a long time, and mostly still, is I generally don't seek out calling gigs. I let people come to me because I want folks who think that I'm going to be a good fit for their community dance. Not all callers are great fits for all dances. I call for some more established community dances where the dance level is a bit higher, but honestly, I feel like my best fit is dances where there's a mixed level of experiences. So, because I feel like I do a pretty good job of making the newer folks feel comfortable and welcome and like they're having a good time at the dance.
If you're a new dancer and you're thinking you might watch 1 or 2 before you start dancing, I recommend highly against that. Just start right from the get-go. We're going to start with a Contra dance. So find yourself a partner and come on out on the floor. If you've never danced before, don't be shy.
I try hard to make those newer folks feel welcome and to give them what they need to get moving as fast as they can, moving on to the fun stuff, not having to spend a lot of time listening to me drone on and on about how you do this dance.
Give your left hand to that gent. Yep, just walk right across to the other side. Pull by, all right? Left hand to that gent, so pull by to the other side, just walk to the other side. Left hand to that gent, right hand around that lady's back and wheel around as a couple. You got it, so good. Try it one more time.
I call dances mostly regionally, although occasionally we'll get something a little more far-flung than that. There are dance events all over the country. There are dance events all over the place. Dance is therapy for me, for sure. For an hour or 3 or however long the dance is, it's like, we're gonna be here, there's gonna be music and people dancing and people having a good time. Whatever else is going on, you can just set it aside for a little while. And the other thing about a dance, generally, if you make mistakes, everybody's very forgiving of that. In true community spirit, part of it is, let's see if we can make this dance work. So dancers are helping each other on the floor, the music is helping the dancing going on. There's never any reason to be unhappy at the dance, because even if you mess something all up, it's just a dance, so what does it matter?
Join hands in a circle to the left, circle 3 places.
When I was first calling, I remember for the longest time, every time I had a calling date coming up, the week ahead of time, I'd be thinking to myself, why have I done this to myself again? I can't believe I've put myself in this situation yet again.
All 4 people balance the ring. 2s arch everybody through.
That nervousness starts to fade a little bit, which is great. I'm so glad that I no longer, torture myself the week before a calling date. I feel that much less often than I used to.
Number 1, swing your partner. Face down the ball, step between your neighbors, make a line and promenade.
Don't try calling a dance if you've not danced it before. There's so much ambiguity when you're reading words on the page. As a dancer, You get a perspective about the dance that you don't get as the caller. How good did it feel to go from that move to this move? Which part was I confused about? Which part was I always running to catch to make sure I got there on?
Who wants to dance? Who wants to dance?
You're trying to build a ride for the dancers. Start with straightforward things. Let the people who haven't done a lot of dancing kind of get their feet wet, learn a few skills over the first few dances, and then start putting in some more interesting dances as the evening goes on. As the evening goes on, our brains get tired, so then you start going in the other direction, making your dances a little simpler as you get closer to the end of the dance. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of dances out there, and I carry around my little box of index cards which have my notes for each dance on them. I probably don't have 1,000 dances. For the first couple of years when I was calling, I would spend a lot of time getting ready for the dance, partly just because I didn't have a big repertoire of dances. Now that I've been calling for a while, I have kind of a body of dances that are sort of my go-to, but forever you're always going to be adding new dances in because you'll go somewhere and be like, that was really fun, I want to share that dance with other people.
Swing your partner. Partner, swing your partner. That's called half a hay, by the way. Half a hay. You'll end that swing with whoever's being the lady on the right, whoever's being the gent is on the left.
You choose your words very carefully when you're a dance caller. As you do more and more dance calling, you'll say something and you'll see how people respond to what you said, and you'll go, oh, yep, they did just exactly what I said, but it's not what I meant. You have to think not just about exactly what the words you said mean, you also have to think about how people are going to interpret them. My job as a Contra dance caller is mostly to get out of the way. What I'm trying to do is put into all the dancers' mind a little pattern of moves that they just have to remember for a few minutes. And as the dance repeats over and over and over again, that pattern gets easier to hang on to. And so I can stop calling a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until I'm not calling at all. Honestly, perhaps my favorite moments are when I'm not doing anything. The dancers all have the dance down. They're just enjoying the dance, the company of the other dancers on the floor. They can really concentrate on enjoying the music. You know, you're standing up on a stage and you're watching this whole room full of people moving basically in unison with one another.
Everybody swing your partner one more time. Thank you, partners, and thank this band, the Wildflower Pickers.
Oh yeah, we're still thinking about what we just did. It's okay, you get to try it all again with a new face, with your new neighbor, balance and swing.
I would say one of the biggest challenges of being a dance caller is keeping your cool despite what's going on.
Stay with me, just listen, and you can go along as we move along.
Even when you have stumbles, or maybe there's a sound system problem, or 3/4 of the way through your dance, the tour bus pulls up and 50 people who've never danced before walk into the hall. And any of these sorts of situations might be where it would be really easy for the caller to just be like, I don't know what to do about this. But everybody's at the dance to have a good time. You too, caller included. Occasionally somebody will get upset about something. The sound is not good, I can't hear anything in the back of the hall, or your dances are too easy, I want some, you know, whatever. But your goal as the caller, I think, is to just try to keep that happy, enthusiastic, we're all just here to have a good time energy going, despite anything else that's happening. Keep your cool, even when not everything is going just right. One of the ways that you can tell if the dance was good is if somebody comes up after and says, what was that dance that went like this? At least that person thought that this was a great dance, and probably other people did too.
Do-si-do. Two ladies, do-si-do.
One of the existential angsts that people go through as they're growing up is, what do I want to be? What am I going to do? I feel very happy with where I've landed now. It took me a while to figure out where I was going to fit in the world, but I feel like I've found a good spot.
Bye.